Svihlik and Shooter here with a special episode. We have the legend. He's at MLB.com now. You may remember him like I do from getting actual paper and print notices from Baseball America. But it is the legend, Jim Callis. Jim, welcome onto the show.
Hey, glad to be here with you guys. I enjoy watching the War Room. It's fun to be a part of it.
Outstanding. Today we're going to be talking more specifically the thing that I guess everybody is a buzzword, mock drafts. How you go about them, stuff like that. It really is a fascinating, for me, a very important aspect of baseball. It drives content, it drives eyes to the screen. But I think what you do with the way you go about your mock draft is of vital importance for keeping baseball at the forefront, especially with prospects, draft, college, high school, connecting all that, because the MLB draft is very unique.
No, it is. I mean, these players aren't as well known. It's not like the football draft or the basketball draft where you know these guys. I mean, I'm in Chicago, and even the hockey draft, everybody knew who Connor Bedard was. And, you know, this year we only got the number 2 pick in Chicago, so there's going to be no Macklin Celebrini. But everybody knew who Macklin Celebrini was. And, you know, I think the top college guys are a little bit famous, but once you get past the first 5 or 6 guys, a lot of fans just don't know these players. They don't know the high school players. Like Connor Griffin's tremendous, but I don't know how many casual fans know who Connor Griffin is or have seen him play. So yeah, it's interesting. And we always joke about mock drafts. We could do a mock draft every day. I mean, that would kill us. And I don't want to do mock draft every day. I mean, I'm fortunate. I kind of alternate with Jonathan Mayo where we trade him back and forth, but fans can't get enough of mock drafts. Like you could literally do mock draft every day and the people would be like, yeah, couldn't you do 2 a day? You know, morning and afternoon or something. But people love the whole concept of a mock draft.
I'm right there with you to the point of, I hate this mock draft, and then I'm clicking on everyone. Why not? Oh, this is fun. Oh, this isn't interesting. They have this guy at 28. That could happen. Who knows?
Now see, I would like to do a real draft every day so I can cover up my mistakes. So let me ask you this, Jim. When through my lens, you and I have known each other for a long time. And by the way, thank you very much for coming on with us today.
I'm glad to.
We've known each other a long time. And I've always been fascinated by these mock drafts. And I think about some of the things that Shooter just talked about. One of the questions I wanted to ask you and kind of get into a little bit was how these drafts, for better or for worse, they can really set expectations. And in some regards, it's a really good thing. Because to your point a second ago, fan bases out there, they don't know all these players. And we've been saying that for years. We have college baseball now on TV, so people should know them. But for some reason, people just don't know these players like they do or celebrate them like they do even in the NHL or certainly in the NFL. But when I look at these expectations for fan bases, and I think about the expectations that they can set for owners and major league teams, I think about the expectations they can set for a player, for the agent. I mean, probably one of the most difficult negotiations I ever had was with Khalil Watson. And a lot of it had to do with what the expectation was. Right. So by the time he got down to 16, I was in a real pickle. It was tough. It wasn't a very comfortable situation. So talk to me about the integrity of what we do and how important it is to the industry as we look to set these expectations for teams, players, agents, owners, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like, I'm not going to name any names, but there's people who do mock drafts who will try to do something splashy or they'll make it about them. Hey, I've uncovered it could happen like this. And I don't ever look at the mock draft as being about me. I mean, look, I'm competitive. I want to get every pick right, which is impossible. But I try. And if I don't get the pick right, I at least want to lay out in the paragraph of analysis, like if the team doesn't get player A, they're looking at B, C, and D. Like I'm hoping to hit most of the time on that stuff. But you're right. I mean, I think you have to look at it with integrity because you don't like you just said, it makes it interesting. If I'm blowing up guys who aren't going high, that creates a lot of problems for a lot of people. And so we try to get as much information from whether it's teams, agents, and try to make sense of it all. Because as you know, DJ, if you talk like a lot of agents are like have on where their players are going, but everybody wants to think the best of their player. So agents generally think guys are going higher than I think they're going in a lot of cases. And they're, like I always joke, if every guy who's going, every player who an agent told me was going in the first round went in the first round, we'd have 60 first rounders. Like it just doesn't work that way. But no, I try to be cognizant of the fact of not, like, you hear some crazy rumors, like, one of the favorites always is, oh, the team that's picking first is going to cut this huge discount deal and take some guy ranked 15th on everybody's board. And like, I try to filter out noise rather than just, hey, somebody told me this, so I'm going to run with it. Because then I think you can look foolish and throw stuff out there that it doesn't make sense. And to your point, DJ, about expectations, I've had in the past agents tell me, it doesn't happen a lot sometimes, but like, hey, you have my guy too high. He's not going there. And when that first started happening, I'd be like, why are you telling me this? This isn't what I usually hear. And exactly what you're getting to. We're trying to manage expectations. Like, I remember, this was years ago, talking to Brody Van Wagenen about Michael Wacha. And, you remember Michael Wacha, who's had a very good career, went lower in the draft than he should have. They couldn't spin a breaking ball. That was the knock. Had a great changeup, couldn't spin a breaking ball very well. And I thought he was going to go in the 11, 12 range. And I remember Brody telling me, I think the morning of the draft or the day before when I was working on my final mock, he's not going to go quite that high. And I said, hey, I appreciate that. Why are you telling me that? And he's like, we're just trying to manage expectations, because when he goes, I think he went 21st, which I don't even think I thought he'd go that low. He was trying to manage expectations for his client. But, and it's, I'll ask you a question, DJ. I don't know that the Marlins did this, but there's teams, I understand where you'd look at PBR's mock draft or our mock draft or Baseball America's or whoever as a mild form of cross-check. Hey, they have this guy here. We don't have him there. Let's look into him. But there's teams that actually input mock drafts and rankings into their algorithms, and that blows my mind a little bit. Like, blows my mind a little bit.
Yeah. I think Shooter wants to touch on this a little bit. And this is, I'm going to answer your question in a second or opine on that. I think about how reliable the information is that's being distributed to the media, whether it's Baseball America or it's MLB.com or it's to PBR. When you don't have firsthand accounts of these players, you have to go out and source this information. So what's the incentive for a team to give really good information? How much of the information that you get is disinformation as teams look to try to maneuver players around the board? So I think a lot about that.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, we're fortunate that in baseball you can't trade picks. Like talking to people who cover the NFL draft, everybody lies to everybody in the NFL. Because you can't. DJ, you and I have talked in the past, and if there's a guy you like, and let's say last year you picked 10th, and let's say there's a guy you liked at 10, and we were talking players, you don't have to worry that if I put in a mock draft, hey, the Marlins are going to take, when you guys took Noble Meyer, I'll just use Noble Meyer again. You guys took Noble Meyer. You don't have to worry about if I put Noble Meyer going to the Marlins 10th in a mock draft, but somebody behind you is going to be like, oh, we got to trade up and get it. Like, that can't happen. So I do think the teams are a lot more forthcoming. Now, I'd say in a given year, there's maybe one or two picks where a team will tell me, hey, if this guy's here, we're picking him. Like I'll have, but most of it's not that certain. It's more like I'll generally, especially if you get deeper in the draft where you don't even know who's going to be there, who's going to be gone. I'm trying to maybe, I'll maybe talk to a scouting director or text him and say, hey, you guys are picking 18th. I'm hearing players A, B, C, and D here. Anybody I should add and subtract to that list. And a lot of times guys will tell me, and if it's in the 20s, I might send 6 or 8 players. A lot of times teams will tell me, we're not really on these 2 guys. So I'll take them out of my mix. And sometimes, a lot of times guys will ask me, and this is where I think the information helps from teams, and why it's like, what I like about doing the draft is, unlike when I'm doing, say, a top 30 prospects list for an organization, that's kind of a one-way street. The team knows its players. I'm more, looking for information. I'm talking to other organizations about the players. With the draft, it's a two-way street, because I think it's a lot easier for the guys I talk to talk to me. And I'm not claiming I know everything by any means, but I think I probably talked to as many people in the business on the team side and agent side to try to put this together. So if I'm a scouting director, instead of having to try to piece this together with like 15 different calls, you can talk to me and I can give you a lot of that. Then that's not going to preclude, like, DJ, you have close relationships in the business when you were a scouting director. Yeah. I'm sure, you used to work for the Yankees. I'm sure you probably talked to Damon Oppenheimer at times. Hey, what are you hearing? Or, that type of thing. But I think I can, and other people who do this can be kind of like one-stop shopping where you get a lot of that information. I do think with the agents, you kind of have to be, and agents are very helpful. And a lot of those guys are very accurate where they think their players are going to know, but you kind of have to know the agents and know how much of a handle you think they have on their player. There's guys who are always optimistic. And so just because a guy tells me, hey, my guy's going top 3 years, or he's going top 7 guaranteed, it's like, okay, well, it doesn't always happen that way. And the X factor is, when teams cut below slot deals and guys jump up the board, where you sometimes see that coming, but you sometimes don't, that just pushes everybody down. So, but I don't think we get too much like disinformation where people are lying to us like they do in the NFL, where they're just saying, oh, we're not interested in that guy because they don't want anybody to know about it. Yeah. I kind of, on one hand, want to see the trading of draft picks or more trading because I think it would create interest. But on the other hand, it's like, man, that would make my job difficult because then I don't think teams would necessarily be as open. At the same time, it's not like anybody ever says, hey, here's my draft pool. We're picking 8th. Here's our top 8 guys in order. Just have at it. Like, you more have to kind of suss it out.
I thought this year might be the best year to just trade down. Oh, we're picking at 22, 23. Can we get 3 seconds and a third for this year? This team needs a quarterback, something like that. So it sounds like you just really sift through the BS really well after all this time. Is that something early on where, hey, you're just getting going? This is the mock draft. I have some connections, leaning on this guy to, hey, now your Rolodex is far bigger. You can kind of get the information here, cross out this. You kind of have the attic going with lines going all over the place. This guy's going here.
It's more a spreadsheet, but it's kind of simple. Yeah, no, I mean, the longer you do it, the easier it gets. And like the thing is too, and I feel good about this. I mean, I think people I talk to in baseball, they know if they tell me something in confidence, I'm not going to go out. Like if I'll just pick a team at random. Let's say I'm talking to the A's who pick 4th this year. If the A's tell me, hey, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, when I do my mock draft, I'm not going to say, hey, Eric Kubota, whoever I talk to with the A's, says this. It's going to be more couched as the A's are looking at. I'm not, or sometimes teams will say, look, this is who we're like. I've had this happen, maybe a couple weeks before the draft, like we're picking 15th. We're high on a guy that the people don't have in that area. I'm not going to tell you this now because I don't want the name out there, but they might tell me the night before the draft. And they know, like, I've done this long enough that they can tell me something in confidence and I'm not going to go ahead. Like if they tell me, don't write this, or I need you to wait on this, or, I certainly don't name names of where I'm getting information from. So it helped. And like I said, I mean, having done it long enough and you talk to enough people, like if I'm talking to the White Sox pick 5th, like I can, like, and they'll probably do some of this themselves, but they'll be like, hey, what are you hearing in front of us? Who do you think's gone by the time? Or a lot of times I'll get, like, if teams pick in 18th, hey, do you think so-and-so can get to us? Or do you think they'll maybe mention 2 guys? And that works 2 purposes. 1, I can tell them what I'm hearing on those guys. And 2, it's like, okay, well, they like those guys in most cases. Like they're not trying to fake me out by asking about guys they're not interested in.
And you know what's interesting about that? And DJ, you can kind of come in with that. It's beneficial to both sides with the way that the draft works and honestly, the signability of how much does this guy want? Where is he falling to? And the fact that everything goes so quick. You just talked about Cleo Watson there going down, his expectations. But if you can get a little bit of information just to be prepared, because unlike the NFL, NBA, like there's so much more that goes into it with regards to the signing pool, the signability. The fact where, hey, we're picking at 20, I don't know if we have enough to get this guy. It might be something you have to figure out. So that information, DJ, maybe you can talk to that idea of like, yes, we need that info.
Yeah, I think teams want to get first. Let me circle back because I made a note here. I didn't avoid your question. The reason teams use the mocks, it's the whole concept of wisdom of the crowd. That's it. It's the wisdom of the crowd, where players are going to go, where they should go, and it just creates a lot of questions especially for people that aren't out on the scouting trail, analysts, people in the front office. They like to incorporate that stuff. And so that's what it is. As far as what Shooter's talking about, we talk about comfort and discomfort. That's how I like to think about it in the draft for these scouting directors or whoever's making the decision. It's a really, really uncomfortable situation in a draft room, especially the further down the draft board you're picking with all the unknowns. So to your point there, Shooter, team decision makers really want to get comfortable. So you need the information as soon as possible because there's just not a lot of players that you get really, really comfortable with. And sometimes it's okay making a selection when you're a little bit uncomfortable because that's the right pick. But the earlier you can get that information, the earlier you can sort that information, the better it's going to be. To your point, Jim, on agents, it's amazing to me how good some of these agents are. And it's equally as amazing to me how bad some of these agents are. I have some good friends in the industry, and I really respect what they do. And there's other guys that I actually do like them personally, but every year they overvalue their players.
100%.
And it creates a major problem for the player, and it creates a problem for the team that eventually picks that player. So
it's easier on me. I don't have to pay these guys or draft them. I just can kind of shake my head and be like, I don't think your guy's going that high. But you're right. And that's when you talk about manage expectations, the players, when they see, oh, I'm going 8th, and then they go 15th, that's a problem. Sometimes the parents get involved. The parents are like, what happened here? And I'll get on my soapbox here a little bit. The one thing that annoys me about mock drafts is I don't know if it's 6, 8, 10 people. There's very few people who actually, I think, talk to people in the industry. I think there's a lot of mocks which are basically done by, hey, I'm going to look at PBR's mock and ESPN's mock and MLB's mock and BA's mock, and I'm going to pick and choose nuggets of information that are in those mocks and then spit it back out as my own mock when I haven't talked to anybody. And it's like, and look, if you're a good writer, you can write that so it seems like you have sources and you've talked to people. But that part drives me insane. Like, and someone be like, oh, I got 8 picks right. Well, it's like, okay, but like, did you talk to anybody? Like, no. Like,
that's the integrity part that I touched on in the beginning. Like, there needs to be a little bit of integrity here. Just like when a team puts together their draft board, there has to be some integrity to their draft board based upon the work that they did. Just because they have a whole cadre of scouts helping to put that stuff together doesn't mean that a media outlet can't be just as responsible, because it does set those expectations. One of the questions I want to ask you, Jim, I think we've talked about this a little bit before. When we talk about putting it together, and you don't need to divulge all of your strategies or processes and how you do it, but talent, and I'm a little conflicted on this. I don't know. Talent versus how you think they're going to go. And at what point, at what point in the draft does it just become talent or how you think they're going to go? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah. So like, I know when we're doing our top 150, we have a top 150 now. We'll go to 250 by the time draft rolls around. That's just simply lining up in order of talent. That's based on who we think is going to be the best player in the long run. It doesn't, like I heard you guys talking last week, nothing to do with signability. I heard the same thing, Shooter, you hear. Oh, that guy is not going to be signable. It's like, I don't care. Like if I think the guy's the 40th best player, based on information we're having in the draft, if he goes to college, fine. Like, and I like identifying the high school guys who are good, who want to go into college. And then 3 years later, you're like, oh, we had that guy ranked pretty high. Like, yeah. I feel good about that. The mock draft's totally different. Like, there's times in the mock draft, Jonathan Mayo just did a mock draft for us. I'll do one next week, where I'll tell you the hardest part of the mock draft, and I don't know if you find this, Shooter, when you guys are doing them, is when a team is going to make a pick. I'm like, that guy shouldn't go there. That's too high. And I don't believe in the player. And like, that's the toughest part looking back as the draft's unfolding, like, oh, I missed that pick, is when you're like narrowing it down to like 2 or 3 guys and you go with the guy you think is the best player.
Yes.
Like, or you think is clearly better than the other 2 guys, but the team likes the player better than you think he is. But no, when you're doing a mock draft, it's 100% who I think the team is going to pick. It's not, like I said, I run into that problem all the time. Like, especially this year, it's going to happen. We're going to get through. I think there's a clear top 10 or 11 picks. I don't know if they'll go in the top 11 because there's signability guys, which is also an issue because you can't see them coming. But I know when we're getting to 12, 13, 14, 15, there's going to be guys I like, and I'm going to be like, I should put it like, I like Carson Benj. I think I'm a little higher on Carson Benj than the industry. I don't think he's necessarily going the first round, but I think he's a borderline. I like Kevin Bizzell at Texas Tech. Like, I could see factoring into like the 25 to 35 range. And I think the industry doesn't quite see him that high. So that you run into those, categories where I'll probably project a catcher I don't like as much as Kevin Bizzell going in the first round at like 28 and be thinking, I should go Kevin Bizzell. But that's where I find the talent versus who the team's going to pick. That's the toughest part of it, is after you get rolling. Like, I can't think, and I wouldn't name him if I could, but like, there's not a particular player this year where I'm like, oh man, I'm just out on that guy. I don't like him. Everybody thinks he's a first round pick. But like, it pains me sometimes. It's like, man, that guy shouldn't go 12.
Yeah.
Like, that's too high. But if you keep hearing information, it's like, okay, I guess I'll put him 12.
And how much of that is, hey, this team takes these types of guys. They will never take this one. This Connor Griffin's sitting there at 17, but I don't even know if at 17, but like, they're not going to take him. What? Will that come up too?
A little bit. I actually think that's the most overblown part of mock drafting. Is and look, I know, and I haven't done my first full mock of the year. I'll do one next week. And when you do your first one, and like, it's gonna be 2 months in advance, there's not a lot of concrete information, especially after you get past the first 5 or 6 guys. But like, I just never buy like, oh, Team X has drafted this type of player 3 times in the last 4 years, so they're going to do it again. Like, the draft doesn't work that way. Like, yes, there are teams that aren't going to take a high school player probably in the first round, or a high school pitcher in the first round. But you can't just say, oh, this team, like, off the top of my head, I don't know how many years it's been since the Orioles have taken a pitcher in the first round.
Grayson Rodriguez, 2018.
Yeah.
But that was it was the prior regime. That was not the Mike
exactly.
Elias.
And that's what I'm saying. So like, I don't buy into the fact like, oh, Mike Elias and company have never drafted a pitcher, because when Mike was in Houston, they took Brady Aiken 1-1, which is totally different. But you will get, so I try to avoid that. Like, I will, just for the sake of writing, if, like, for instance, I can't think of a good example. Like, let's say Grand Canyon had another good player this year, and I was projecting him to Oakland. I might say, hey, Oakland's taking Grand Canyon. This would be the second straight Grand Canyon first rounder. But I don't try to make a projection based on, oh, they've done this in the past, so they'll do it again. Because if you drafted the same type of player every year in the first round, that wouldn't be a very good strategy either, unless you're just, unless your strategy is best player available. If you're just saying, like, oh, we're going to take, I think back to the Cubs. When the Cubs were rolling, everybody at one point was like, oh, the Cubs are so smart. They're taking the best college hitter no matter what. Chris Bryant, Kyle Schwarber, Ian Happ. It's a great strategy. Well, and yeah, those guys were good big leaguers. But at the same time, you look back, and I'm not saying they should have taken pitchers. The Cubs didn't have any success drafting pitchers in those years, which is why they weren't able to stack pennants and World Series championships on top of 2016. So I outside of deciding, this team's not going to take Connor Griffin because he's a high school guy and it's too much risk. Or there's teams that are very much into contact rates. So like, okay, they might not take Vance Honeycutt. I don't look too much at track record, because you also don't know like what factors went into making a specific pick in a given year. Just because a team took 3 college hitters in 3 years, maybe there were pitchers they wanted in their pocket got picked, or maybe there was a high school guy they wanted and he went 2 picks ahead. It's not, I wish it were that simple, but I think, don't you guys think, like, I think fans think that's a lot more cut and dried than it actually is. I don't think, like, DJ, when you were running the Marlins drafts, you're like, hey, we're taking this specific demographic in the first round because that's what we do.
Well, the market's different every year.
Yeah.
Your point. So you have to accommodate a different market every year, different strengths and limitations of the draft. But you also, on our previous episode, we talked about player development. There's a lot of things that go into taking a player, and you have to have comfort that player is going to have an opportunity to succeed within your organization, or you almost have to eliminate that type of player, which is difficult to do, and most people don't understand that. But and it's certainly not a crutch; it's just a reality. If you don't feel comfortable, these scouting directors and decision makers are on the hook for their pick, so you have to be really, really comfortable that player is set up to succeed. Really, really important.
I think on looking back, and you, Jim, probably more than anybody else with how much you've done with regards to the draft, can look back and say, this was the right pick here, right? Guys fizzle out, but like at the time on that day, they took this guy at number 5, and then number 23, Mike Trout becomes Mike Trout, Wade in the 20s, the second pick to the Angels that year. But at the time, this was the pick, and you can't fault the guy because that was where the evaluation was. This kid just outperformed the industry. Is that something you
100%? I do that all the time. Although DJ can speak to this. I don't think scouting directors get judged like that. I don't think usually when people are writing about somebody's track record that they do that. But you're exactly Mike Trout. I'll never forget 2009 first draft we had on MLB Network. That was the Strasburg was clear number one. Mm-hmm. It's funny. You look back and all these teams are like, oh, we almost took Mike Trout. Not true. Like, I think the A's were on him a little bit, and they took Grant Green. I think the A's were picking around 13. They took Grant Green. I do think, DJ, were you with the Yankees at the time? 2009?
I was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at 28, I think. And everybody else, there's all these stories. There's a lot more than those two. Yeah, there's a lot more than those two teams that will tell you, oh, we were on Mike Trout. And I don't think that's the case. And the Angels obviously were. And I remember Frank Marcos, who used to run the scouting bureau, was actually on the main desk for the first year MLB Network's draft broadcast. And they had Frank give you his top 5 players. And it was Strasburg and Ackley. And I don't remember who the other 2 guys were. And one of the 5 guys was Mike Trout. And I remember thinking off to the side, man, Frank's way high on Mike Trout. But yeah, I'm sure, if you go back and look, was that the year the Orioles took, the Pirates took Tony Sanchez and Orioles took Matt Hobgood, which were both reaches. I think that's right. Those were both reaches. But they'll get who took, did Brian Mattis go 3rd in that draft? Maybe, does that sound right?
He was 08.
No, I might be confusing my drafts. I'm confused. But anyway, it's way too easy to go, hey, Mike Trout went 24 or 5 or whatever the pick was. He should have gone 1. If you look at Dustin Ackley versus Mike Trout, it's oh, what a terrible pick for the Mariners. But at the time, I think everybody would have most teams would have taken Dustin Ackley too. So you have to look at it in that context. But I think kind of what DJ was alluding to, I don't think scouting directors get looked at that way. It's just either your pick was good or it wasn't good, not it made sense at the time.
That's it. It's the outcome.
Yeah.
That's all it is. They don't want to talk about process and they don't want to talk about strategy. You just get evaluated on the outcome. That's it.
And you talked about with your top prospect rankings, the same way we do put our draft board together. That's kind of what the envisioning is. This is something to be held accountable, not the accounting of the draft and the fact that this guy didn't go here, this guy didn't go there. Here's where the talent was. The Orioles walked away with 4 top 20 players.
Right.
That was a huge haul. They did a great job. And then, as I always tell DJ, just blame it on PD in the end. If nothing else, you drafted the right guys. They screwed them up.
Hey, Jim, you touched on a couple of things a second ago, and Shooter's alluding to something right now. I wanted to get into this. The post-draft evaluation, before we move into the 24 draft, when we look at the post-draft evaluation, everybody wants to opine on, did this team do a good job? Did that team do a good job? That's probably the most frustrating thing that a scouting director has to deal with after the draft, because we all know that 5 years from now, the order will have been wrong. Right. But yet everybody wants to throw out either this team did a really good job, that team did a bad job. I mean, 5 years in a row, I apparently did a really good job. Now I'm not there anymore. So, it really bugged me. It really bugged me about how teams get lauded for doing great things, or they get, people say that they didn't do a really good job. And then watching how those players, and this is the point of my question here or statement, players moving into a MLB top 100, players moving up into a prospect list, and where they mocked and how they were evaluated, how the team's draft was evaluated, then lends itself to these players moving up the board. So you're going to get guys like Ed Howard, who just didn't really do anything, make it into a major league top 100. And you're going to get a guy like Anthony Volpe, who took multiple years to get there, or maybe Evan Carter, the Rangers, who was a surprise pick, or a guy like Jackson Merrill, who's a relative unknown for the Padres, takes him a minute to get up there. So how do you come to terms with that, the relationship between where the player was picked and then how they move into the MLB top 100?
Yeah, there's 2 things there. One, I agree with you. It's like mock drafts. Everybody wants immediate analysis. How did teams do in the draft? And we know you aren't going to really know how well a team drafted till at least 5 years down the road. It's just simple truth. But people still want to know. And I think back my early years of Baseball America, we used to do annual draft report cards, which I think they still do. And it had a bunch of categories like best hitter, best power, best fastball. I was doing these, I think, going back to 1989, at a time when there wasn't even a lot of this information available. And we used to put letter grades on them. And I remember in 1990, the Twins had one of the best drafts of all time. I think it was 89 or 90. Maybe it was 89. They got Chuck Knobloch, they got Scott Erickson, they got Denny Nagel, they got Denny Hocking, like the 50-something round. They got outfielder, I think from Puerto Rico, Marty Cordova, one of the top 10 or 15 drafts of all time. And Terry Ryan, who was their scout director at the time, always used to give me a hard time because I gave him a C+. Because you just don't know. You just don't know. And I was like, yeah, that's ludicrous. And I remember Bob Fontaine, who was with the Angels in the early 90s. It might have been the year they took McKay Christensen the first round. And I think he went on a 2-year Mormon mission and he never really panned out. And I think I gave him a C. And I don't think I was wrong on his draft. But Bob called and we stopped putting letter grades on. He's like, putting letter grades on these things is ridiculous because you don't know. And we don't know. And I was like, you're right. So we still did the draft report cards and we'd have some analysis. We stopped putting grades on. Now at MLB.com, I think I do the top 5 or 6 drafts after the draft's over. Like who had the best hauls. But the thing is, the teams always look the best after the first day are teams that are picking in the top 10. Because you're getting one of the elite guys. Yeah. Teams that have multiple picks because they had that sandwich pick. Teams that have, like now with the lottery, teams picking at the very top. The Guardians, have 17, 18. I don't even remember what the pool is. It's like huge pool. So they can have all kinds of flexibility. It's not like everybody drafts from an even playing field. And, again, if we went back and looked 5 years, I should have done this. I didn't. It would have been interesting to go back and look like in 2019, who did I say had the 5 best drafts in baseball? And how true is that? Like, it's just, there's so much, whether it's injuries or player development or just you're projecting on guys and things don't work out. It's tough. Yeah. I get where that's hard. And then with the top 100, we talk about this all the time. It's not perfect, but yeah, pedigree matters. Like an Ed Howard is going to jump onto the top 100 quickly. Not so much more than, Jackson Merrill, he was a late ride. He went in the first round, but like a guy who's a second or third round pick. If you have 2 players, I guess the best way to put it, if you have 2 players, and it shouldn't be this way, but it is. Let's say they're the exact same player and they develop exactly the same way. And one guy's a first rounder, one guy's a third rounder. The first rounder, because of his pedigree, is probably going to get on the top 100 list earlier, get cut more slack if he gets hurt or struggles than the guy who goes in the third, fourth round. It takes maybe a year or 2 for that to kind of get washed out. But we see that happen all the time.
Man, I knowing Terry Ryan, I can only imagine that he would continue to say this to your face and to this day.
Terry was kind to me though, because it was funny. I met Terry when I was in the University of Georgia in '87. We had 2 first rounders, Derek Lilquist and Chris Carpenter. And Terry came in back then. Twins scouting staff was very small, and so Terry was the scouting director. He came in, and I remember I was sitting next to him in the bleachers. Back then, the press box held like 4 people. So I was sitting in the bleachers talking to a friend of mine. He's like, hey, you seem to know a lot about these guys. So he was asking me, looking back now, kind of makeup questions on Lilquist and Carpenter and what I knew about them. And we were getting ready to play Old Dominion, was our midweek game coming up after this series. It was coached by Mark Newman, who you probably knew from the Yankees, DJ. Mark Newman and our coach, Steve Weber, played together at Southern Illinois. And I think we're in each other's weddings. So anyway, we were playing Old Dominion. They had 2 guys. They had a kid named Wiley Lee, who wound up being a 5th-round pick, and a kid named Todd Azar, who literally hit like 480 that year, but it was like stats over tools. Anyway, Terry had a very small staff. He's like, I don't really want to have to double back here and see those guys. He's like, do you have access to a stopwatch? And I worked at Bennigan's as a waiter at the time. We had 15-minute lunch, so I had my Bennigan's stopwatch. So he's showing me how to clock home to first times on a stopwatch. And he's like, hey, could you clock? He's like, just clock Todd Azar and Wiley Lee when you guys play them on Wednesday. Just see what stands out, and I'll call you back. So I was, I guess, like a bird dog for the Twins. So anyway, Terry would stick the needle in about the C+, but we always had a really good relationship because I stopwatched Wiley Lee and Todd Azar for him. So
let's talk 2024. You ready to talk 24, Shooter?
We'll go 37 years in the future, or 37 years forward from that.
Now that TR is the Twins Hall of Famer, let's move right to 2024.
So Jim, here's my thing on 24. Again, I haven't been out a ton watching players and whatnot this year. My first time in 2 decades not doing that, but I can read and I have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. I hate saying a draft is weak. I don't like saying that because every draft has their strengths. Every draft has limitations. We hear it every year. Scouts go to the Cape and they say the Cape's down. But we're still going to take a bunch of players, and 12 to 15% of them are going to make the big leagues and so on and so forth. But when you look at this 24 draft, is there a bigger indictment to some of the limitations of the draft other than we only have 3 college pitchers that are consensus first rounders: Yusevich, Bernsey, and Hagen Smith. And then even probably more importantly, and we talked about this off air, is there a prep player in the state of Georgia or Florida that's going to go in the first round? Because I'm all the way back to 2016 and I can't find that. So maybe just those 2 things is a little bit of an indictment of where there's some lacking depth. Now it looks like the college hitters are pretty good towards the top. But how do you view this 2024 class in its entirety?
Yeah, I do think it's funny. Like, we always get asked to put the 20 to 80 scale on things. And like, I do feel like this draft compared to a typical draft feels more like a 40 or 45, where 50 is average. But what you said, DJ, is 100% correct. Teams are still going to make 31st round picks. They're still going to draft 600 something players. There's still going to be good players in the draft. And it's everybody's job, whether it's us ranking players for PBR or MLB to rank them, or if you're in scouting to go out and find them. You can't, this, you can't just go to your GM and say, it's kind of a down draft this year. Right. I'm going to take a couple months off and I'll circle back and see if that's you still have to go find the best players. You got chances to find a big leaguer. But no, I do think Kellen Lindsey from Florida could sneak into the first round. Like, I don't think there's anybody in Georgia who might go in the first 2 rounds. Wow. I do agree. Like, there might be a couple more college pitchers, like a Jonathan Santucci or whoever, sneaking, Jurangelo Cinche is kind of fascinating. Maybe they sneak in. But what gets to me about this draft is you have all these college hitters having great years at the top. The Condons, the Bazanas, the Cagliones. Nick Kurtz has come back strong. Weatherhold's starting to hit now that he's back. Braden Montgomery's having a great year. You have those guys. You have the 3 pitchers you mentioned from college, and then you have Connor Griffin and probably Bryce Rayner from high school. And then after that, like, if I was picking 12th, not that the top 11 guys are all going to go 1 to 11, but in that 12 to 15 area, I know from preliminarily talking to teams, I think opinions are all over the place. And I don't think the guy you get at 12 to 15 is necessarily going to be that much better than the guy who goes 25 to 30 this year. It's, but it's like you were saying about the K, every year, everybody always says, oh, there aren't enough first rounders, but it feels that way a little bit more this year.
And shoot, I mean, imagine this: one Australian didn't come to the States, and then some walk-on didn't turn into Mark McGuire. But
what if Charlie Condon goes and plays quarterback at a D3 school? Like,
the things change in a hurry. But I'm with you. It's very fascinating. DJ, you and I have talked ad nauseum about this, but like that 12 through 20, finding that tier. Hey, how far apart are these guys in the 12 to 20 tier? So these 8 picks after those top, let's say 10 or 11, you said Rayner, Griffin, who we think are like the 2 high school guys who stand above, which has been an absolute, even last summer, going back to like saying this class is not going to be settled at all. And you will see some random things in the prep class. How important for you is it to have a good grasp of, can these teams do some stuff here? Because after the top 10 or 11, they may think there's 50. These guys are 50 in this bracket where we might be able to get 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think the ability to save money with your first rounder and spend it on your second rounder, it's easier said than done. Like there's a couple factors. One, it's not always easy to take a guy at a discount without sacrificing quality. Like, look, if you could take a discount, great, but you shouldn't sacrifice quality and take the 25th best player at 12 because you think then when you pick again at 35, like the guy, you can't guarantee guys are going to get to you. And and I will say, I really liked what DJ did last year with the Marlins. He took Noble Meyer at 10, which to me was not sacrificing talent, but he's able to save money because you guys have talked about this industry. High school right-handers, are frightening. Like, can't take them. But if you actually look, there's some pretty good high school right-handers become pretty good big leaguers. And then using the money DJ saved, he got Thomas White at pick 35, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And they went over slot. But like, and again, Thomas White's a high school pitcher. So there's, those guys don't always go as high as they should. But DJ, you still, I'm imagining, you had to wait 25 picks to find out if you were actually getting the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm sure you had a backup plan, but I don't know if you had a backup plan that was I think Thomas White got, was it 4 million, 4.1? Yeah. Like you might not have been another $4 million player necessarily if Thomas White was gone. Then you have to find $2 million players. Like that stuff's hard. And like, that's one where fans are always like, want their cake and eat it too. Like, hey, like I'll just make one up. I'm a Rockies fan. Could we take Caglione and save $2 million and then get JJ Weatherhold at 34? And it's like, no, you can't.
No,
like,
no.
There's one media guy who likes to always he's pushed this at two different outlets. This scenario where, hey, one team they're going to blow past their pool and spend $25 million on the draft and get all these guys. And it's like, well, are the other 29 teams going to let those players get to you?
Yeah, exactly.
No,
it ain't happening.
That's the hardest part. And like, I'd like to ask you, not specifically about what you did last year, but it is not like, I look at the Orioles. You look at the Orioles who took Austin Martin. No, they took Heston Kjerstad in the COVID draft. Mm-hmm. And I think they were going to try to get Nick Bitsko with their second pick. That was what I heard. Mm-hmm. And Nick Bitsko went to the Rays in the first round. And Nick Bitsko's barely pitched because he's been hurt a lot. There's a high school pitcher who scares people. But they wound up, okay, what are we going to do with the money? They used it on Kobe Mayo, was one of the guys they gave money to. That worked out pretty well. And then a couple of years later, they took Colton Cowser at 5, who's a pretty good player too, but that was a discount pick. Yeah. And like everybody knew, second round, Orioles are going to give Judd Fabian $3 million. Well, one pick before the Orioles, the Red Sox took Judd Fabian. So then the Orioles are scrambling. Well, what do we do with this money? And that they didn't spend that money as well that year. Like you can really box yourself in a corner if you try to save a bunch of money on your first pick, because you cannot guarantee the guys getting to your second pick.
That is not a strategy. This is a very strong belief of mine. If you approached it, that's very irresponsible to approach it that way. You're making a lot of assumptions if you think you're just going to save a bunch of money on a player. So we've talked about this. Simply put, you line the players up on the board, and you guys touched on this earlier today. We talked about it. You line the players up on the board in the order in which you like them. That's it. There's going to be some savings associated with a lot of these high picks because the money is so massive. You just assume that there's going to be savings, but you're not selecting the player because of the savings. You're selecting the player because of the talent, and then you give them a little bit of haircut, and then that's fine. Yeah. To your point last year on Noble Meyer, and I was very conscious of this in the room, and I asked it a number of times. I want to be very clear here. We're not putting him here for a savings. We didn't even know what his number was till the very, very end. We did not get in the weeds with the signability till the very, very end. It just happened to be a lower number. And the agent knew that he was going to slide a little bit because he was a high school right-hander with a little lower slot, wasn't a track man, darling. So he was willing to give us a little bit of a haircut up front. So it's always talent first. That's it.
And if it works out like that, it can be great. Because I think back to when the Cubs took Kyle Schwarber at 4, which was higher than most people thought he should go, and turned out to be a good pick. They used the money they spent. They gave $1 million to 3 7-figure bonuses to 3 high school pitchers in the middle rounds, 2 of whom were Justin Steele and Dylan Cease. And they did it a couple years ago. But Cade Horton was like a late riser shooting up boards. And they liked Cade Horton enough to take him at 7 on talent. But because there wasn't a lot of track record, they took a discount. Then they were able to get Jackson Ferris, very talented high school lefty, with their second pick, who it pained them to trade him, but they turned him into Michael Bush, and they're not complaining about that trade at all. So, like, that's the dream scenario, is if you have a guy that you like and maybe you value him more than the industry to where you can save money, then it sets you up. But, like, every fan, it goes back to the first draft with bonus pools where the Astros saved money on Carlos Correa, which people forget about. They saved up in part because the agent screwed up. The agent took too big of a discount because the Twins, if Buxton had gone 1, the Twins would have taken Correa 2, and the agent didn't realize that. So he took, like, he thought he was going to go 6 or 7 to the Cubs or Padres. But, like, this scenario where, we got Lance McCullers Jr. in supplemental first round because we got Carlos Correa at 1. Well, no. The funny thing was, looking back at that, if they'd taken Buxton at number 1 and paid him $6 million, Correa got 4.8, they still could have gotten Lance McCullers. They wouldn't have gotten Rio Ruiz in the 4th round. But because that was the first one and Carlos Correa became so good so fast, everybody's like, oh, this was brilliance by the Astros. Everybody should do this every year. And it's a lot easier. It's just not easy to set that up.
Let me make sure I make this very, very clear. If you take a player, the extra money is just giving you flexibility. But it's flexibility, very generally, very simply put, just general flexibility. It's very difficult to plan on, to your point a second ago, that other player being there down the board. And the reason for that is because as that player moves down the board and the agents tell you, don't take my player because I have a deal behind you, right? You know what I'm going to do? The same thing Brian Barber did. He just pulled them. He just pulled it. He takes Andrew Painter. He's not going to be scared off. The money is so big. So when you're the team, you just can't plan on a specific player being down the board. The idea of like package deals, and that's not real because scouting directors are just going to pull the player.
Can you think about though, with regards to prep guys though? So if you're going in the 2nd or 3rd round, like, hey, this team definitely does not, like the Astros this year, once they reach a certain point with $5 million, like there are high school guys that are just off the board immediately. Right. Can you like take them off the board though?
Yeah, I mean, if you know a team, you can take it off for individual teams. But DJ's point, and the bonuses keep going up, the slots keep going up, and I like to refer to guys being prisoners of their own talent. Like you'll hear sometime, like last year, there was talk, and I don't know if it was real or not. Oh, Dylan Cruz doesn't want to go to Pittsburgh. He's not going to go to Pittsburgh. And my point was, if Pittsburgh decided Dylan Cruz was the guy, I think the slot was $9.7 million last year, and nobody had ever gotten more, I think, than Torkelson's 8.4. Like Dylan Cruz at the top, if I'm the Pirates, and let's say Dylan Cruz didn't want to go to Pittsburgh, which I don't think is necessarily true, I just take him, and I'm offering him $9 million or 9.2. Dylan Cruz really going to go back to LSU for senior? No chance. Same thing with these high school guys. Like some agent may tell you, hey, don't take my guy. He's got a deal. He's got a deal. And let's say a guy's got a deal for $3 million. If I take him and offer him 2.5, like one, I don't have to get out of that other team's way. I'm picking ahead of him. If I want to pick the guy, like DJ said, I'll pick him. And look, I may not have the $3 million, or I may not want to give him the $3 million, but if a guy's going to sign for $3 million, especially if you're talking high school pitchers with injury risks associated with pitchers, is he really going to turn down 2.5 or 2.7 if I don't offer him every penny? In most cases, the answer is no. He'll take that.
Jim, Shooter, some of the best agents know where their players are going to go. We talked earlier about the relationships we have with the agents have with the team. There's some really good agents out there that I've called agents before and tried to do a deal with a player. And he said, we're wasting our time. My player's going to go off the board. And I said, well, what if it's this, this, and this? He goes, there's nothing I can do. He's just going to get taken. So they know it. Even the agents know that the player's just going to be taken. And Shooter, to your point, some of these high school players that are going into the 2nd and 3rd round, it's really, really easy with these bonus pools for these teams to get over $1.5 million. That's just, you're not punting picks. And there's still a lot of cachet when you go up to a high school family. You say it's 1.5 in all your school. It's 1.8 in all your school. So it really does open up the possibilities for a lot of these high school players to get paid in the 2nd and 3rd round. It was really easy for us to pay Carson Milbrand. That wasn't a stretch for us. And that was the 3rd round. So
Jim, this might be a better question for you, just being in the industry. Has there been any talk to revamping like the slotting system and the pools? Because the reason I'm saying this is just how the decreasing value happens throughout the first pick to the second pick. What if in 2019 there were 15 Adley Rutschmans? Well, then at 15 you're getting half price the same player. So has there been any change that may be on the horizon for that?
Not that I've heard. I mean, if you had a draft with 15 Adley Rutschmans, that'd be a pretty good draft. No, I think, and this is speaking generally because I'm not like I'm involved in negotiations. They tweaked the slots in not the last CBA, I think the previous CBA, because when they initially set them, they set the first few slots super high. And then they were like so out of whack relative to what players were getting. They kind of toned those down and spread the love through like picks 5 through 10 a little bit more. I think the union's main concern with the draft is just that, okay, we've agreed to this system. but the slots need to keep rising relative to the industry's growth and revenues, which is exactly what it's tied to. I don't know all the numbers that factor in, but like revenues went up X%, so the slots are going up X%. As long as that happens, I don't think the union really cares how that money breaks down, as long as the total number keeps going up according to revenues. And I think for the teams, I don't think they care too much, other than we want cost certainty. We just want to know the draft is going to cost us X. So I don't think it's really an issue for either teams. I mean, and DJ, you could probably speak to this. I mean, most of the draft rules related to money that are, negotiated in the CBA, it's all about money for the union and the owners. Like if the scouting directors come and say, hey, look, we've got an idea, this would work better. I've been doing this for 30 something years. They don't usually listen to the scouting directors and the people who are implementing the system. No. It's usually just about dollars and cents. So I don't think there's much talk of a change in how that money will be allocated.
Okay. Yeah, it's those types of conversations are far and in between, way above the pay grade of the scouting directors. That's happening at the president level, at the COO, CFO level. The scouting directors have nothing.
So let me tie that kind of to this year's draft, whereas last year it kind of felt like the presumptive top 5, right? You had the 3 college guys, the 2 high school guys. They're going to go in some sort of order. This year, who is the first team that needs to make a decision? Who do you think is the first team where it's like, hey, these guys actually, we're going to find out what they were doing throughout the spring?
I really think it's, assuming that the top guys go with the top picks, it's really, to me, more the Red Sox at 12. Like to me, I think your first tier is Condon, Bazzana, Caglione, 1, 2, 3. I don't know if it's going to play out that way, but I think there's a good chance. And then I think you have the rest of the college hitters. You've got Smith and Burns, and you've got Connor Griffin. Those would be the next 6 guys. And then I probably have Rayner and Yasavich would be 10 and 11. And then after that, I think
then we get fun.
Yeah, like you could tell me, like a guy who I might think is the 12th best player in the draft. If I'm the Red Sox, some other team I think is the 25th best player in the draft. So I think it's good. It's going to be interesting. The Red Sox slot is, I think, right around $5.5 million. And again, I don't know that they're looking to take a discount per se, but if the first 11 guys go 1 through 11, then maybe they take a guy closer to 4.5 to give them some spending power later. I mean, it's going to be somewhere in the early teens. Like if you're the Red Sox, you're hoping somebody cuts a deal, somebody takes a guy we don't like, and maybe their top 11 is different than mine. So maybe it's not the Red Sox, but I think back to the year they got Trey Ball. They were picking 7th, which at that point was the highest pick they'd had, I think, going back to 1967. And Trey Ball was 7th on their board. And the guys who went 1 through 6 were the first 6 guys on their board. So they wound up with the 7th guy. So we'll see. But I think, how about for you guys? But I think in the early teens is where it's going to get really interesting.
They're not going to jump. The industry won't jump up for a James Tibbs or a Cam Smith.
I think they will.
Would they do that? Are they that far? The Tibbs and Cam Smith group, that hitter group, are they that far behind the group that we've just been referencing? The Condon, Jack, Ryan. Couldn't they do a deal for a Tibbs or a Cam Smith?
I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, I do think those guys are on a tier below the. If I have Condon, Bazzana, Caglione on one tier, and then I have Kurtz, Montgomery, Weatherholt, like just a shade behind them, I do think your Tibbs and your Cam Smith and your Seaver King, you got your Toolsy Vance. Yeah, like I think they are below, and it'll be interesting. I like Tommy White. I like Carson Bench. I'm not saying I would take him at 12.
Sure.
But I think you have a much bigger group. And, again, if you talk to 3 different teams, if you ask 3 different teams, okay, after the first 6 college hitters, give me your next 5, and you ask 3 teams to give you the next 5 names, you might get 10 or 12 different players there. I just don't think there's consent. And you might see a guy like Walter Yannick jump up. You got your Caleb Lovita, Malcolm Moore, Jacob Cozart.
Yeah.
Like catchers always kind of go higher than you think. So
the quote unquote safety, the safety of those college guys early feels like somewhat of the consensus of, to me, it's looking at like, hey, we're going to crush the 2nd and 3rd round. there's a bunch of talent in this next level tier that we can try to get. So let's kind of find this safe college bat who we can send off, have some success early. He does his thing. And then from my standpoint, that second round of just crushing high school guys, the supplemental, which we've seen a lot in the past, but all those names you just ripped off, I feel bad for you putting together your mock draft, which is the gold standard of the industry, especially this year where things can go up in smoke in a hurry.
Yeah, but I mean, the mock drafts are easy. That might be the most fun thing I do, because like I said, I feel like instead of me just pumping guys for information on prospects, like it's a two-way street, and it's interesting. Like, I mean, this is pre-bonus pool era, but like going way back. So first year that they had a signing deadline, MLB was convinced this is going to change bonuses, and I was like, I don't think it's going to change bonuses. Scott Boras doesn't care whether the deadline. It used to be when you set foot in a classroom, and then Scott's guys just wouldn't go back to school, and Max Scherzer would sign the next May. And I was like, well, just because you put a deadline in August, Scott's just going to back you up till August 15th. He just needs a deadline. Doesn't matter when it is. Any case, like Rick Porcello was the big high school arm, and he wanted. I think we were coming off the loophole free agents year before, where Matt White got $10.2 million, whatever it was. So Rick Porcello wanted big money, and I could not find a home for Rick Porcello in my mock draft anywhere. I just could not find the team that was going to pay him. And I remember, he probably won't mind. This is 20 something years later. So David Chad was running the Tigers draft. I'm talking to David Chad the night before, and they'd gone heavy. Verlander got a big league contract. They'd paid Maben well over. They used to have unofficial slots before the official slotting system. I'm forgetting somebody, but they'd gone over slot, over what MLB had recommended, which was usually below market value, like 3 or 4 years in a row. And I remember telling David, I just don't know where Porcello is going to go. I was like, any chance you guys would take him? You guys have been aggressive. And David was like, nah, we can't, we just aren't going to be able to do that again with this new system. We've gotten heat for what we've done. We can't possibly take him. And so I didn't say David Chad told me that, but I wrote in my mock draft, hey, Tigers, even if Porcello gets to him, they can't take him. I got that direct from the source. Everybody else who didn't talk to Tigers, like, oh, Tigers have done this, maybe they'll do Porcello. Hour before the draft, my phone rings. It's David Chad. And he's like, hey, I wanted to give you a heads up. I think Porcello is going to get to us, and we're going to take him. And I'm like, David, what are you doing to me? Like, how are you doing? I good naturedly, but like, and he said, he's like, I didn't really think there was any chance he could get to us, but when we spoke the night before, and you were saying that you did not have a home for him, I went and talked to Mr. Ilitch, and Mr. Ilitch said, if he's that good, go get him. And I was like, okay, well, it's like, I'll take, like, I mean, it's cool that I guess help the Tigers lay the groundwork there, but like, I always give David a hard time. It's like, I was the only one who talked to you, and I was the only one who had the wrong information. But and Eddie Bain told me the same thing with Jared Weaver. Like, they didn't think Jared Weaver was going to get to him, and it was the same thing. I was like, I don't think Jared Weaver has a home, and he went and talked to Angels ownership, and they're like, yeah, if he's there, go get him. So, well, it doesn't happen as much now that we're in the true bonus pool era. But like, it's cool. Even though I was wrong on Porcello, it was kind of cool. Like, hey, I helped the Tigers out a little bit. Like, I'm glad to do that. So
made Rick a lot of money too. So good for you.
Well, I think Rick made Rick a lot of money. So he was good. Well,
Jim, DJ, do you have any other questions? We've taken way too
much
time.
I really appreciate the time.
Oh no, this is fine. I mean, I'm old enough. I remember both you guys as college players. So I think I wrote our Baseball America scouting report on Shooter. And DJ, I was at Stats Inc. when you were at Illinois, so I didn't write up a scouting report on you, but I remember you as former Big Ten Player of the Year. So, and now
scouting reports on good players.
Shooter's not getting great, but you and I are getting great, DJ.
Well, you have a Rolodex of stories. Next time I'm in Chicago, we're going to have to get a drink together, talk about some of these. But really looking forward to the draft, your coverage, what you're going to have from that, and what's going to transpire here on the road to July. So Jim Callis with us here on the War Room. Until next time, Svihlik and Shooter. See you at the ballpark.